Hi everyone! This is a bit of an impromptu video. I do have videos that I want to get made before I go to Edinburgh because I'm not altogether sure how much time I'm going to have in the first couple of weeks to be making videos. You know, things might be a little bit crazy, but this is not one of those videos because I haven't really had a chance to sit down and plan any of them. I'm hoping to do another Tarot of the Gods video. I'm hoping to talk a little bit more about the other main books that I have about the Morrigan and some of my favourite resources for information about the Morrigan, and I think there were a couple more kind of videos about books and things like that that I wanted to make. But this video was really just coming about because there have been a couple of different things on my mind recently. I've had a couple of different thoughts regarding videos that I've been watching on YouTube, and I might do a bit of a shout out as well actually to a couple of channels that I've been watching recently. I just have two in mind. I know there were more that I was planning on mentioning in a video, so I'll see if I can remember them and maybe I'll attach it to the end of this video or something. But first and foremost, I wanted to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for all of the lovely comments that you left on my Lunasa vlog. I don't know if I've said thank you in a previous video. Everything has just been so crazy that I can't even remember how many videos I've made since the Lunasa vlog, but I was really moved by all of the really lovely comments, some really beautiful comments from all of you. And you know, thanks even if you didn't leave a comment and you watched and you got something out of it or you felt something, you know, thank you for sharing that moment with me and for just being with me on this journey. And yeah, it just really meant a lot just to know that so many people were thinking of me, thinking of Bumble, and also I've just had a lot of really lovely responses and really lovely comments about what I do here on YouTube and with Heart Story, and just a lot of encouragement and a lot of feedback. A lot of people have been moved to tell me that what I do actually makes a difference and that their spiritual practice has been, you know, hugely shaped or changed or helped by what I do here. And just hearing that is just the most wonderful thing. It's the most wonderful gift, because that is just what everything I do is all about. I am just eternally in service to you, and if I can be of service to people and if I can help people start to achieve some of what I've started to achieve with my spirituality. I mean, I often feel like I'm a long way off being as spiritually centered and as comfortable in my spiritual practice and just having it be what I want it to be. I often feel like I'm still, you know, it's still maybe not what it can be, but more and more I'm learning to embrace that and to embrace the process of the spiritual journey rather than being caught up in wanting it to be a certain way, wanting to reach that end goal. And I'm always encouraging you all to do the same. So I'm just really glad that while I'm on this journey, while I'm in that progression, that I'm able to help other people to start on the same kind of path, to start doing the same thing. And yeah, it's just meant a lot to have so many kind words in such a difficult time in my life. So on a similar kind of note, the first YouTube video that I wanted to kind of address and respond to very briefly was a video that Kellyanne, TheFourQueens, made very recently. I'll link all of this stuff in the down bar, you know, in case you're don't know who I'm talking about, or you know, looking for a link to a video. She made a video about I was going to say toxic comparison, but it was primarily about imposter syndrome, and this is something that is a huge issue for me, and I'm going to talk about that a tiny bit now in this video. But before I go into that, I just want to mention that I commented on the video to thank her for this and just to say that, you know, her words are very helpful to me, and a lovely lady replied to my comment saying that myself and Kellyanne are two people that she actually puts on a pedestal in that sort of toxic comparison, kind of assuming that the person's life is perfect, kind of putting them on a pedestal kind of way, and that it's kind of, you know, it's funny to her that the two of us are there saying that, you know, we struggle, this is something that we struggle with. I mean, Kellyanne has said herself, obviously her video was primarily about helping other people who struggle with this, but you know, she said that this is something that she has, that, you know, that she feels sometimes, and a lot of people who we might look up to and see as being very successful or seeing as being better at something that we want to be good at, it's something that they struggle with too. So I just felt like this was something that I wanted to make more widely known, because if it's helpful for one person to hear that, you know, I struggle with imposter syndrome, then maybe it'll be helpful for more people. Because I tend to like to be open with you about the struggles that I'm going through and how my spiritual practice isn't always perfect. It's not always what I want it to be, and I do strive to be really honest about that, because I feel like me just showing you the parts of my spirituality when everything's going swimmingly and everything's, you know, I'm feeling really connected and everything just feels right, I feel like that's a little bit disingenuous, and it's not actually helpful, because it makes people feel that if they're not achieving that every day, then there's something wrong with their practice, that they're not doing it right, that they're not as spiritual, I suppose. So I do kind of strive to make that clear, but at the end of the day there's only so much of your life and your feelings and your struggles that you can actually share on a YouTube channel, and especially when the aim is sort of to help other people, to provide information and to provide experiences that might be inspiring to you, or that might help you, that you might kind of resonate with in some way. So I don't think I've ever talked about the fact that I do struggle a lot with imposter syndrome, and that is a wonderful term for it. And toxic comparison as well. The two kind of go hand in hand, I think, and that's something that Kellyanne did talk about. I think when it comes to the pagan community, my spirituality, and even Heart Story, one of the reasons I love making YouTube videos, and one of the reasons I love being part of this community, and one of the reasons I've actually created Heart Story, is because I actually struggle with imposter syndrome a little bit less in this kind of area of my life than anywhere else. And I think it's because I feel less pressure to be proving myself. I feel, because Heart Story is what I have set it up to be, because I went into it with sort of full disclosure and being very open and honest about the fact that this is a struggle, and it's particularly at the very beginning when I first started blogging, I was really just dipping my toe into the water. So all I was doing was just sharing the process, sharing the difficulties, and sharing how much I didn't know, juxtaposed with what I was learning and what I was figuring out. So I think I felt a lot less pressure to be perfect, a lot less pressure to be kind of proving myself in this kind of context, which is really, really nice, and you know, that's one of the reasons I love doing what I do. But it is something that I struggle with. It's something I struggle with Heart Story sometimes, particularly, of course, I'm being quite vulnerable in saying this to you, particularly, of course, when money comes into the equation. And I wanted to start offering services for a fee, because I felt like if I did that, I could put more time and energy into Heart Story, because there's only so much time and energy you can put into something when you're not making any money from it. It can only be a hobby. You have to pay the bills, you have to feed yourself. So I really wanted to be able to put more time and energy into Heart Story, and the best way to do that was to start getting some monetary recompense for my time. And you know, I've absolutely no regrets about that. I don't ever put myself in a position where I'm feeling uncomfortable about that, where I feel like, you know, what I'm offering isn't worth the money or whatever. You know, I've been very careful to be very honest with myself about how much I really think that what I'm offering is actually worth, and never to be charging more than what I feel comfortable charging for those kinds of reasons, and also to avoid that sense of imposter syndrome. And of course, you know, it's with this kind of thing, I will mention as well, if this is something that other people are struggling with, if you are trying to set up a business where you're offering spiritual kind of services or whatever, and if you are the kind of person who struggles with imposter syndrome and you have been struggling with pricing your services or products as a result, I will say that yes, I think it's important to feel comfortable with your pricing. It's important to never be putting yourself into a position where on those dark days you might start thinking that you're ripping people off. It's obviously important to be avoiding those kinds of negative thought patterns as much as possible, but I think you also need to be careful not to be kind of undervaluing yourself as well, and get really honest about what you think a kind of fair price is for, you know, think about if someone else was offering the same thing that you're offering with the same qualifications and experience that you have. Think really honestly about what, you know, you would be happy to pay them, and then think about if you can, you know, if that's a comfortable kind of price range for you. Anyway, I'm going very off topic with that. And basically what I wanted to say that yes, you know, imposter syndrome creeps in occasionally with that, because it is something that is so integral to me. It's one of, you know, the primary kind of struggles that I periodically kind of go through. But luckily it's something that I don't struggle with too much with Heart Story and with the channel, and that for that I'm very, very grateful. But it is something that I struggled with hugely in university, and so that's one of the things that I'm feeling a little bit nervous about as I'm putting myself back into the university system, is that I know that I have huge issues with feeling like I need to prove myself, feeling as though I'm not actually as intelligent as my grades might be suggesting that I am, that I'm, you know, getting good marks, you know, purely through dogged work, through just working very, very hard, rather than actually because I have any great intelligence or creative ability, academically speaking. And that kind of thing. I definitely had huge issues with that, and particularly with music for some reason in my undergraduate degree. I think because the other music students were, a lot of them anyway, were very caught up in the music world. You know, an awful lot of them had been listening to classical music and playing classical music, and from a very young age, and they were actually engrossed in that world, whether it was kind of classical music and that they were wanting to perform or conduct, or you know, conduct choirs or what have you, or whether they were kind of immersed in the contemporary music world and very immersed in that kind of music and interested in it and interested in composing it. And I wasn't interested in either of those kinds of musics. I was only interested in traditional Irish music, which is something that I played pretty seriously for quite a lot of years, and in kind of pop rock kind of stuff, which is kind of the side where I wrote my own songs. And so although I have a very natural music ability, and I have no problem in saying so, that I am very musically talented, I went through the entire degree feeling like an imposter, and getting my first grade, first class honours, what am I saying, in music didn't actually really help. And that's one of the things that I will mention about imposter syndrome, is that, you know, you often feel like once you achieve that high and lofty goal that you will actually feel like you're the real deal. But let me tell you now that all that happens is you start making excuses for yourself, and I think it's just one of those things that needs to be kind of uprooted from the roots up. And it's really something that you have to acknowledge is it's just a thought pattern, and that it's something that will keep kind of insinuating itself into your life if you don't become aware of it. Becoming aware of these things, becoming aware is usually half the battle. So I would definitely suggest that you go over and watch Kellyanne's video if you haven't already, because it was a really wonderful set of thoughts on the problem, and I found it to be very helpful and very nurturing, and really kind of gave me that hope that it's something that I can beat, and it's something that I can transcend. And I'm definitely hoping that this time when I go back to university that I can start to release those feelings of inferiority and feelings that I have to prove myself, because that's generally what it comes down to, a feeling that you're only worthy, a feeling of worthlessness unless other people kind of can tell you that you are worthy. And that's a very dangerous and slippery slope, because then you're kind of constantly depending on other people's approval. And it generally, that kind of thinking does actually lead to imposter syndrome, because if you can't just feel yourself like you are enough and your approval is enough, and as long as you know that you are doing everything that you can and that you're performing to the best ability that you can, and also just that what you're doing is making you happy and that you're doing it for the right reasons. I think, you know, that's the important thing, and that's the path to happiness and contentment, not this feeling that if you just, you know, get this high grade in this course, or whatever it is, or, you know, get that praise from that professor, that then you will suddenly feel like a real musician or a real artist or a real, you know, whatever it is. But basically that's the mentality that I need to kick, just that feeling of needing to prove myself. So yeah, I wasn't even planning on going into that much depth on that topic, but I just felt like it was something that I should talk about, because if it's something that other people are struggling with and it's helpful for you to know that it's something that I struggle with too, then I think being open and honest and transparent about these things is always helpful. So on a slightly different topic, but I feel like kind of segues fairly neatly into it, I also wanted to mention and make a sort of video response also to Thorne's video on being in or out of the broom closet. She was basically talking about the broom closet in quite a refreshing way, actually. I'll link this video down below as well. Basically she was talking about how people in the pagan community and the kind of witches and pagans, we talk a lot about the broom closet. It gets talked about a lot, and a lot of the time the talk that happens, there is this assumption that you're either in or out of the broom closet, and it's as simple as that. Like, either everyone in your life knows that you're a witch or a pagan, or nobody does, and there is this sort of transitionary period of, oh, I'm coming out of the broom closet, or I'm not, or, you know, you're either in or out. And she was basically saying that it's not like that for her, and she doesn't think it's like that for a lot of people. And I thought this was actually really helpful and interesting, and she said a lot of things in that video that made me realise that I had been feeling kind of uncomfortable and weird about a lot of the ways that I navigate my own broom cupboard. And it was actually really helpful for me to like I say, hear those things, and to know that actually a lot of the ways that I behave about my spirituality, about, you know, my paganness, is actually exactly the same as her. And again, this is a similar kind of thing, that things that just don't get talked about and that you feel maybe slightly guilty or weird about, it can be just such a relief when you find out that this other person who you assumed was behaving in this very other different way, it has actually been behaving the exact same way that you've maybe been behaving all along. So again, I kind of felt like I wanted to respond to this as much as anything, so that my subscribers, who I think are probably a slightly different group to Thorne's subscribers, that my subscribers can kind of see that, yeah, this is something that, this is the way that I deal with it too. And that is basically that, exactly the same as Thorne. I am neither in nor out of the broom closet. And this is something that I have mentioned before, so it's, you know, it's not going to be any big shock or surprise to you guys, because I have talked about this before, particularly in a video called, I think, having a pagan altar in my living room, I think it was what it was called. And I did bring up the topic again in another video soon after that as well. Basically, I think I was probably what you would consider in the broom closet early on in my spiritual practice, and it was a very uncomfortable place for me to be in, because I hadn't even told my boyfriend at the time about my spirituality, or that I was spiritual. I'm not exactly sure how much he had an idea of what was going on, and this went on for about 9 months. And this was, I mean, he wasn't even a new person in my life. I had known him for about 5 years at that point. And we'd gone out, you know, we had actually gone out previously, so we'd gone out for about 2 years. So, you know, he was one of the people in my life who knew me best, and still I felt, you know, really uncomfortable about actually talking to him about it. And then after I told him, I didn't really find a way or feel a need to tell really anyone else. One other of my close friends, I kind of brought the whole thing up one night when we were drinking together, and that was fine, and she was sort of a bit like, I think I might have talked to her about it before I talked to Keith about it, and her attitude was sort of like, well, this is not news to me, which was quite interesting. She was kind of saying, well, she wouldn't have put a word on it, but there was nothing that I was saying that was news to her. She was like, well, I kind of knew that, and it's just kind of obvious, and it, you know, it just, I suppose she's known me since I was about 4 years old. So that was interesting to me, that even though at that point I didn't have an altar open in my living room, and she wouldn't have necessarily known anything about what I was getting up to, I think there's enough in our kind of popular culture, there's enough there about witchcraft and paganism and Wicca, that I think people have a kind of vague idea of what people who are like me and some of you might be up to in our free time under the full moon kind of thing. And I think it's just, yeah, it was like none of it was a surprise to her. Keith, I think, less so. I think he was maybe a bit more kind of, oh, I didn't realise that. But that was really interesting to me too, that particularly my close friends who I'd known for a really long time were just not surprised by the whole thing. It was kind of like, oh yeah, well, I kind of figured. But you know, my point in this is that again, I didn't really say anything to anyone else about it until I launched Heart Story, and at that point I felt a bit like, okay, this is getting a bit ridiculous that I just don't mention the fact that I'm blogging and making YouTube videos and all this kind of thing to any of my friends, bar, you know, 3. So I kind of started to tell a couple of other people about it. I just showed my parents the website and basically came out to my parents, and again it was sort of like no big surprise. It was like, oh right, okay, that's what you've been doing. But then it kind of stopped, and I never really got to the point where I felt like any, like, say, my work colleagues. It was a little bit tricky because it wasn't, this is what I find, because I run a small business, because I actually, you know, provide services and do tarot readings and stuff like that, as well as just talking about my spiritual practice, there's more to it than just my religion. If it was just my religion, then I would feel absolutely no need to ever bring it up to pretty much anyone, unless they were very close or asked about it or wanted to know or whatever. But because it's also something that I was spending a lot of time, and I was working half-time in my workplace, and I was working half-time on Heart Story, and I just couldn't really bring myself to talk to my work colleagues about what I was doing in my other half of my time, and I mostly just kind of said that I was writing and things like that, and you know, that felt a bit uncomfortable to me, but I kind of knew that they weren't going to necessarily understand. That some of them would be kind of like, okay, that's fine, some of them might think it was weird, and some of them might actually be downright kind of insulted. Now, I mean, in the way that they would actually be Catholic and might think that the whole thing was a bit weird or suspect or just not right. Probably very few of them in that workplace, to be fair, but there were definitely people who would have thought it was a bit strange, and it just wasn't something that I wanted floating around in that workspace. And the same goes for kind of more casual friends. And generally speaking, even though all my best friends now know what I'm up to, they ask a little bit about the business. Sometimes I will, you know, say something, but I say very little about it. I don't volunteer a lot of information. I don't volunteer a lot of information about the content that I'm sharing on, you know, the blog and the videos. Only one of them, I think, has ever actually gone and actually watched my videos, and she loves all of that stuff. Like, some of them have gone and watched the videos and read the blog posts, and like every now and then I get a text saying, oh, I just went and, you know, watched like 20 of your videos and I love them, or, you know, we have to talk about it. But, you know, generally speaking, there's very little kind of chat about it, and nobody really asks me about my spirituality because none of them are religious. You know, most of them are atheists, some of them are agnostics, and they don't have any sort of spirituality in their lives. So I think it's something that people just don't have any, they're not spending any time thinking about it. I think that's maybe one of the mistakes that we make, is that we think that everyone else is thinking about this stuff quite a lot. And I know it with some of you that will actually be true, depending on where you live. But in Ireland, and I would say in the UK, and probably in a lot of places in the States as well, it's just kind of a non-issue. Like, just people just don't actually think about it that much. So they're probably not actually sitting there looking at you thinking, I think she's a pagan, or I wonder what she gets up to at the full moon, or I wonder what she thinks about XYZ. They're probably not actually thinking about it at all. And that's kind of what I've been trying to tell myself more and more, is that it's not that people are actually awkward about it, or that they don't want to know about it, or that they don't know what to ask. It's actually often that they just don't even think to ask at all in the first place. And then of course there's family members, and like my parents obviously know exactly what I'm up to. They don't ask questions, I don't share much, and that's fine. There's no awkwardness, there's no weirdness, there's just no need. Again, you know, there's just no need. I mean, my dad goes to mass, but he's not, I wouldn't really call him a Catholic, I would call him a Christian. But I think he has a lot of the same kind of beliefs as I do. Every now and then I have philosophical kind of conversations particularly with my dad. But beyond that, like, it just doesn't really need to come up in conversation. And then my extended family, they know that I'm going to do a master's in religious studies, and they have no idea why. Some of them, my parents might sometimes mention things to them. Some of them might know that I'm spiritual. They probably know I'm spiritual now anyway, now that they know I'm going to do that master's, but they don't, you know, nobody asks. And again, I think there's some level of awkwardness there, I think, that they don't know what to ask. And like my family, like, none of them would be kind of weird about it. None of them would be kind of, like, one of my aunts is a nun, but I'm fully convinced that she's probably the person I could talk to the most readily about this stuff, and there's no way that she would be judging or thinking that what I'm doing is wrong or anything, and none of them would have that attitude. It's just a sort of, I think they just wouldn't even know what to ask or what to make of it, or why I'm at it at all, I think. I think that's the biggest thing, is that people don't really get why you're interested in this stuff and why you're doing it. It's just not because young people in my society, in my culture, don't partake in religion, don't partake in spirituality, generally speaking. So I think people just don't exactly know where you're coming from. So I think the point of this ramble was just to say that, you know, just to make clear that I'm not that open and chatty about my spirituality in my kind of real life. And you know, this is something that I had, for example, not that I'd ever thought about it, but I would have assumed that Thorn talks to her family and her friends a lot more than it sounds like she actually does about her her religion, her practice, purely because she is actually, similarly to me, she's done a master's in religious studies and she is very kind of active in her community. She runs a coven, you know, she's just she just seems like the kind of person who seems very out of the closet. But the reality is, not everybody in her life needs to know the details of what she did last night in circle. And it's exactly the same with me. I talk about it so little, you would be shocked. I think you would be shocked. If you followed me around for a week and saw how little I actually talk about my spirituality, about heart story to other people, I think you would be shocked. You know, Keith is the only person that I talked to in great detail about the business. Every now and then I would have conversations, particularly in the beginning with friends, about it if there's just something that, you know, is particularly changing or that I'm worrying about or thinking about, wondering about. Keith is the only person that I would talk to him in an extended kind of way about the business, that a lot of the decisions I would make and the choices I would make, we would talk about together. And I would always, you know, he would often remember that it's a Sabbath, or if not, I would say to him, you know, Happy Lunasa or whatever. And every now and then he'd say, do you want to go and do something because it's a Sabbath? Or he baked me a cake one time for midsummer. But beyond that, you know, and every now and then, just when we're talking, it will come up in conversation that, you know, I'll just start talking about the divine or cosmos, and we have a lot of philosophical conversations. We have a lot of conversations about the nature of cosmos and the nature of just being and life and everything. But because he's not spiritual, it doesn't take a spiritual kind of angle very often, if you know what I mean. Like, we'll talk about all of these things, but we're not kind of looking at it through the lens of religious practice. Because, you know, it doesn't make sense to, except for when it just organically comes into the conversation because I'm talking about something that I think or that I do or a way that I look at it, and then we kind of move on. So I think, yeah, like I say, I think you would all be shocked to see just how little I actually talk to people in my day-to-day life about this stuff, because I am so open about it here on the channel. But the thing is, here on the channel, like, I know that if you're not interested in what I'm saying, you're probably going to click away, and if you're here watching this video, you want to know about my spiritual practice, you are actively involved in spirituality yourself, and it's something that you're interested in. But, you know, in my day-to-day life, there's nobody else who, you know, actually has a dedicated spiritual practice. So it just doesn't really come up in conversation, is essentially what I'm saying. And I think I'm just going to leave it there because I keep rambling. I could keep rambling about that, you know, all day. But it is something that I'm looking forward to in Edinburgh. I'm hoping to actually be more open about it because there are going to be a lot more people all of a sudden in my life who actually are religious or interested in religion or spiritual or whatever, and I'm hoping that that will mean that actually I start to talk about these things more in my life and actually start to have some real life friends outside of, you know, the internet community, who are spiritual and who want to talk about these things in a spiritual manner. Because like I say, I do have kind of philosophical kind of conversations with friends, and those are wonderful, but they're not, like I say, through a spiritual kind of lens. Good goddess, I sure can talk. And finally, I said that I would do a couple of shout outs because I actually meant to do a shout out like months and months ago, and it never happened. And I haven't made a list, so I'm literally just going to mention a couple of the main channels that I've been, you know, that have been popping up on my subscription feed, that I've been watching a lot of their videos or whatever recently. And I want to just focus on a couple of channels that don't have a lot of subscribers, that, you know, a lot of you probably haven't come across. So the first I discovered yesterday is Wolf Peach Wilds, I believe her channel is called. She comments a lot on my videos, so you're probably watching now. Hi, I don't know your real name, sorry, but I didn't realise that you made videos, and yesterday I came across those videos and had a grand old time making prayer beads and watching and listening to her. She mostly makes vlogs, so they're lovely little kind of edited together scraps of different things, and her walking around woods and just showing us around the north of England basically, and it's all just lovely and witchy and just nice. So she's a naturalistic pagan, so she definitely kind of takes after my own heart in that way. And yeah, if you're interested in watching a couple of nice vlogs and talking about tarot and oracle decks and stuff like that, definitely head on over. Second of all is a woman that I've been meaning to give a shout out to in so long, and that is Rainfire Dreaming, formerly known as Song of Ruth. Ruth just makes beautiful videos. She's just so thoughtful and intelligent, and I just love her vibe. So yeah, her channel is just full of nice kind of chatty, relaxed videos about various different topics regarding, you know, paganism and things like that. So yeah, definitely go and check out her channel. I've mentioned before Alora Tarot Coaching. She has a YouTube channel, and she's been she had a bit of a hiatus, but she's been making videos recently, so you might want to check that out below. She mostly does videos about tarot, other little bits and pieces thrown in, and I like her videos a lot, so could check that out if you're interested in watching some tarot reviews and chats about tarot and that kind of thing. And then finally, another channel that I've watched a couple of her videos, but again, I haven't found the time to watch as many as I would like to, is The Truth in Story. And she's been making great videos going through the major arcana and kind of talking about cards from different decks. So I think particularly if you're getting started with learning tarot, this might be really interesting for just thoughts on the symbolism of the card in the different decks and that kind of thing. She really has quite a large array of decks that she's going through each card with, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so go and check that out if you want. There are loads more that I've subscribed to in recent times, but can't think of off the top of my head. And of course there are, you know, my old favourites who I haven't mentioned because they already have so many subscribers that, you know, you guys have probably come across them, but basically if I mention them in a video, you know they're good, so go and check them out if you haven't already. But you know, there's a lot of my favourite YouTubers have a lot more subscribers than I do, so you've probably come across them, you probably know who they are. So yeah, I think that's about it. This video has probably been, as usual, about twice as long as I was expecting it to be. So yeah, that is about it. I will hopefully be getting to some of those other videos that I want to get done before I go to Edinburgh. Because like I say, I will be making little videos I think when I get to Edinburgh, just to say hi and this is what's going on and I'm settling in, but actually getting planned videos made might be a tad difficult, and I'm definitely going to be very busy over the next couple of weeks. Packing is happening, you know, it's all good, it's getting there. I'm getting there, everything's getting done. This week was all about like figuring out, you know, tax forms and insurance and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, take care guys. I will hopefully be talking to you soon in maybe a Tarot of the Gods video, maybe. If you have any requests for Tarot of the Gods, let me know below, and if you've requested any that I haven't actually made, then let me know too, because I might have just forgotten. I had a list somewhere and I can't find it, so I need to make a new list. So if you have any requests for gods for me to cover in a Tarot of the Gods video, yeah, do let me know below and I will endeavour to do one of your requests before I go to Edinburgh. So take care guys.